been asked to talk about the history of SSL and how we got to where we are and where we came from. The company was founded back in the late 1970s by this guy here, Colin Sanders. His passion was recording pipe organs in churches and cathedrals, and in the process he realized that the control systems for these organs, the organ lofts, were very old-fashioned. They used mechanical relays. They were unreliable. So he developed a system using solid-state relays to switch the pipe, the air on and off to the pipes for the organ, and designed and sold that to churches. And that is why the company is called Solid State Logic, because of this system, the organ control system. It's got nothing to do with audio whatsoever. So that's where we came from. But he also took his recordings to studios to mix them, to produce vinyl albums for the various recordings, and wasn't satisfied with what he got from those studios. So he decided, being an electronics engineer, that he would build his own mixing desk and his own tape recorder electronics for his own studio. So having done that, he then took the console and the tape machine to an APRS show in London, which was the annual big event, in order to promote his studio and get clients to come to his studio saying, I've got this lovely equipment, come and use my studio. But what happened was that people came and saw the equipment and said, I really like your console, can you make me one? So he made 2 of the original A-series consoles, and then about 10 or 12 of the B-series consoles before we came into, and they were literally made in the studio with porta cabins. It was a very, very small operation to start off with. So eventually we came into the E-series, which most people know now. Very famous history of that. Invented total recall, which was the way of storing the positions of all the controls, because we're talking pre-digital here. So you had to manually reset all the controls, and that still lives today in our current top of the range large format analog console in duality. So that's what total recall looks like today in duality. There were some very large consoles made, like this one in the now closed HIT factory in New York. And all of these consoles to date use standard analog techniques, so 20 to 20 kilohertz bandwidth, capacitive coupled stages, traditional analog designs, which most other companies still use. But we had some very clever, and we still have some very clever analog design engineers working SSL, and they came up with a system of a whole procedure for controlling audio, which we've now called super analog. Now, super analog is different from traditional techniques in that we use some special methods, such as having DC coupling through the stages. So there are no coupling capacitors, which means there's no aging and changing of the sound as the coupling capacitors age. It means we have to have very special DC servos to keep it all stable. Which means that the frequency response goes from very low frequencies, perhaps 3 or 4 cycles. At the top end, we extend the frequency response up to 200 kilohertz, and to keep that stable, we use lots of balanced circuitry. The net effect is that within the audio band, you have very little phase shift. Now, this means that SSL consoles are measurably different from anything else, and is why they sound different and better. So it's something you can actually measure. So the J series had super analog channel strips, and that was introduced in the mid-90s. And then in the early 2000s, the K series console was introduced, which had super analog in the master section. So now you had a completely super analog path right from start to finish. All of these consoles were killed off by the EU lead-free regulations. So it wasn't cost-effective to redesign them to make them lead-free. So we started again, looked at what the what people were using, and introduced the AWS console in 2004. Now, this is a mono console, the AWS 900, 24 mono channels. It has different manufacturing techniques, so there's no cables inside. It means the signal paths are very short, but it uses the same super analog circuitry that we developed from the K series. So each strip has full EQ, E series, G series EQ, like the K did, and two patchable dynamics that can be put into any channel. When we introduced the stereo version, which has stereo channels, we've rebranded that the 948, and the 900 became the 924 to keep them, keep it a bit easier for me to understand what the difference is. So these, it says on there over 500 worldwide. That's just because it's a very old display. There's now presentation. There's now over 1,000 of these consoles around. Hugely popular. A couple of years after introduction of AWS was the introduction of Duality. So Duality is a large format super analog console, like the K series, has EQ dynamics in every channel. It's full 5.1 panning, full 5.1 monitoring, and is available in sizes from 24 up to 96 channels. And it is easily expanded. If you have one, you can easily do it. So there are now several hundred dualities around, many more than we ever expected to build. It's been a very, very successful product, and it's still available today, still selling very strongly. Now, in parallel with the analog designs, we were pioneering with digital products. So we had the original, the first proper product for SSL was Screen Sound, then there was Sonaria, then we had A series consoles. We currently have C series consoles, and they have applications from music recording to post-production to broadcast. We have a very illustrious user base. Some of these people are still alive, but not all of them, unfortunately. And in 2004, the company was purchased by Peter Gabriel, so he is currently the owner of the company, takes an interest in what we do, and visits the factory occasionally. He has a representative on the board every month, but we do see him in Oxford at the factory where everything is made. So everything is made in Oxford. The subcontractors are all in the near neighbourhood, so within 100 miles, so we can have very tight control of quality. But everything that's sold, every console that's made, is made in the Oxford factory, tested and shipped from there. There are no other manufacturing bases. One of Peter's remits to the new board of the company was that they should make a live console. Now, we have had people like Celine Dion, for instance, who have used our traditional studio products in live applications, but they were not designed to do that. So he said, no, you've got to do a live console that I can use that will maintain the SSL reputation and be the best live console there is. So the R&D team were given a clean sheet of paper and said, start from scratch, do what you want to do. And in 2013, we released L500. Now, this is from a ground-up design, an R&D team that was specially employed to do this. It's a whole family of products, so it's not just the console, it's stage boxes and the systems that go with it. And one of its first major clients was Peter Gabriel doing his tour. So it had to work. So there was a lot of finger crossing, because obviously without the experience we didn't know. We were pretty sure it was okay, but until the tour was completed, we weren't certain if we'd managed to achieve it. But it's been really well received. It did the job, did it reliably, and continues to do so today. So there are immediately a lot of people who took it up, and it's been used now around the world doing lots of shows. all of this takes a lot of work. We have our own R&D team, a big team now in the factory, and they reckon it's 12,000 man weeks, which is something like 35 man years have gone into producing the console to be used for people like this. So it's been very, very successful. We're now several hundred consoles. I think it's over 300 consoles have been delivered and are being used. They're used in all around the world, and this is already out of date. There are more places than this. So we've had some reports from our users about. I'm going to tell you how wonderful the console is, but let's have a listen to what they think.
Does it sound amazing? It is leaps and bounds the best thing I heard of anything I was comparing it to. And how does it feel? And when I put my hands on it, the faders felt like home.
Like, this thing sounds awesome, and it has features. Okay? It's also got a cool cup holder.
It just seems bigger and fatter and more open. But, you know, I'd tell anyone to go out and try it. You've got to go and try it. Why wouldn't you?
I hope to use it again and again. Definitely on this tour and on other tours as well.
Like, you can put anything anywhere or next to each other, shift it around. And that's a really great thing.
All in all, it's just more like an analog desk with a bunch of outboard gear that you've selected than some of the other consoles I've used.
Everything we plugged in was just, I felt it just sounded better, you know? It's an instrument, you know? It's absolutely an instrument right at the heart of the stage.
Going back in the earlier days of digital, SSL were one of the companies who designed and introduced MADI. So there was a partnership of companies. We were involved in its development, and we know it very well. So we've used MADI for these stage boxes and for distribution of the signal. Now the consoles run at 48 or 96K. 96K MADI stream has 32 channels. So all our building blocks are in blocks of 32. So you'll see that repeated as we go forward. In more recent times, audio over IP has become much more adopted. It's now proven. It's in use reliably in installations and live touring. So we've looked at various different ways of implementing audio over IP. And after evaluating what the different offerings had to give us in terms of advantages, we've very much nailed our colours to the mast of Dante. Now, Dante was designed by Audinate, an Australian company. It is not new. It's been around for, I don't know now, probably 10 years. It was designed originally for the audio distribution for the New South Wales rail system. So it was designed for emergency evacuation, that sort of thing. So it was always designed from day one to be robust. And it has developed over time. So Dante is what we are now using for our audio over IP. It just works. And what we've done is take the Dante controller API that Audinate produce, and we've integrated it now into the console. So from the console, you can do Dante routing. You don't have to go to a separate app and use the Audinate Dante controller. You can do it from the console. And when you do it from the console, you're actually doing dual domain routing. You're actually routing within the Dante network. So you're taking a source, a stream, and you're subscribing to that stream, and you're also putting that stream into a channel in the console. So one stage is bring it to the console, the next stage is bring it from the console into a channel. But you do that now from this page in one go. So it's a very integrated workflow for Dante. We've introduced some new stuff as well, such as ownership. So there is no contesting over who has control in terms of the audio gains over mic iCamps. It can be changed, so you can relinquish control, give it to somebody else, or you can maintain control and make sure that nobody else is going to adjust your analog gains. So these are unique features to the way that we've implemented our Dante controlling system. And this will be developed in the future, as Audinate have recently introduced or announced Dante domain controller, which will further enhance the way that Dante works. So there are currently 350 plus companies who use Dante. These are just some of them. And between those, there are thousands of Dante products, which means there are hundreds of thousands of implementations of Dante working today. It's not pioneering, it just works. It really does work. It works reliably. So when we introduced L500, it was the big console. It did all the things that for the biggest shows, and there was always an intention to produce a family of consoles. So from L500, we then produced L300, which is what I have here. And then 2 weeks ago at Pro Light and Sound, we introduced the new member of the family, which is L200. This is a price point entry level console now. Is available, but sold out until July, because it's been much more successful than we even expected or hoped for. And unfortunately, the side effect of that is I can't bring you one here today because they're all been allocated. So I've brought you 300. The good news is that everything you can do on here, you can do on a 200. It's just the same. So let's have a look at L200, shall we? So its control surface looks like this. You'll recognize stuff from between these consoles. So it has the same operational touchscreen as on this console. In fact, it's the same software. It's exactly the same software. The difference is that this screen is slightly smaller, which brings the size of the thing down a bit. So we've got a 17-inch screen as opposed to a 19-inch screen. It's got the same focus tile that we have on the far right there. It's got 3 fader tiles, so you now have got 36 faders on an L200. And it's got a stand for your tablet, because the tablet will become more, you'll see in a minute what we can do with the tablets. On the way that the busing works is exactly the same as the busing for the other consoles, because again, it is the same software. The only difference is that the numbers are smaller. So on L200, you have a pool of paths. You have 144 fully processed paths. So all of those paths have full EQ, dynamics, filters, delays, all the rest of it, from which you construct your console. So from that pool of 144 paths, you say how many buses I want, what sort of buses, whether they're mono, stereo, and what type of buses, so stems, auxes, or masters. And then also how many channels I want. And from that you build your console. And that console is built for your use, and you save that in your show file. So we give you a set of templates to start from if you want, or it's a blank one if you want to start from scratch, and you build your console. So the way you build it is exactly the same in all the other consoles as well. Some of the features of the console, which are common to the other consoles as well. You can change the processing order of the blocks. So you've got filters, EQ, dynamics, as I said. To change the processing order, simply mute the channel, slide it along with your finger, the order you want, and unmute the channel, it's done. You don't have to reboot the console or reconfigure the console in any way. It's just that simple. And we'll show you that in a minute. You can do it yourself. The console, once you've configured it in terms of numbers of buses and types of buses, if you want to, you can change that at any time. You can do that mid-show. You're in the middle of a show, I need another aux. Go to my configs page, add an aux, and it's there. It is just, that's all you do. And it works. You don't have to reboot or anything like that. So that can be done on the We use something called stem groups, which are like subgroups, but they're more than subgroups. So stem groups are groups that can feed into other stem groups, so you can nest them. And also you can choose on a channel-by-channel basis where they're fed from that particular channel. So you choose a default point, whatever suits you, and then when you create the stem group, all the channels will feed from there. But if you want to, you can go into any channel and change that. So you might have one going post-fade, but one going pre-fade if you want to. And there are several pick-off points on the channel that you can choose where you feed that stem group. The channel spill feature enables you to spill out component parts of a stereo or a multi-format channel. So on one fader I might have a 5.1 channel. If I spill it, the next 6 faders will have the component groups for that 5.1 channel. I can make a differential change. I can change the level, say, of the rear speakers, change the EQ perhaps of those, and then fold it back up again, and it will maintain that difference with any other subsequent changes you make. The query feature on this console is very powerful and is configurable by the user. Now, we generally leave it in the way that most people use it, but you can change it. So how it is set at the moment on here is if you press the Q button once, on the adjacent fader tile, it will show you what the destinations are of that thing that you've pressed. So if it's a channel, it will tell you where it's feeding. If it's a bus, it will tell you if it's feeding other buses. And if it's a bus, it will also tell you what is feeding it. So it will tell you the contributions to it. And they will appear on the layers and bank switches on the far side. And it will just show you where it's going and where it's coming from. If you press and hold it, then it shows you all the things that could feed it and all the places it could go to. Now the difference is there that if it's a bus, say for instance, it will show you all the channels that could feed it, and it will light up the ones that are feeding it. The advantage of that is you can go along and you can then add more things to that bus. So if you're a monitor engineer doing a monitor mix, you can look at your aux send, and you can say, oh, I want these channels are feeding it, oh, I need that one, I don't want that one. And you can change your routing to that aux straight from that query function. So it's a very powerful way of both interrogating the console to find out where the hell it's going, and also to change how it's being configured. You can also do things like when you query it, you can, for instance, make it energize the solo button. So for a monitor engineer, again, if he was querying an aux, and you can change it, the auxes work different to channels. If you query an aux, then it will solo that as well. So then you will, as well as making the change, you'll actually hear the change in which particular solo bus you're using. So it's highly configurable and very, very powerful. Iconics was something that was invented by Peter Gabriel himself. It's a way of representing the channel source as a picture. So as well as labels, normal text labels, you can also go in there and you can put a picture up, so it makes it much faster to recognize a source, because your eye sees the picture, oh yeah, it's the drums, and then oh yeah, you can read more detail underneath. So it's a way of speeding up the workflow. We've introduced an app that runs on Android or iOS machines called TACO. That stands for Tablet Control. So Tablet Control allows you, say, a monitoring engineer to go along to listen to an aux and control that aux remotely on his iPad. So he could go across the stage, stand at the various positions, listen to the mixes, and actually make adjustments from that position. You can also lock it out, so it's just on a tablet-by-tablet basis. You can have up to 10 of them. So you can lock it out so it just controls one aux. So you could give it to the drummer and say, do it yourself, which you probably would like to do probably most of the time. So it has different ways of working. The engineering function, so the way you have control of everything, is being expanded and will expand in the future. So there are already enhancements to it. If you want full control of the console, there is the SSL offline setup app, Salsa, which runs on a PC, has to run on a PC or a Mac running an emulation of Windows. That runs the actual console software on my PC. From here, I can do both offline setups, produce a show file and plug it into the console, or I can plug the PC into the console and make it a remote controller. So from my touchscreen here, I can do everything I can do there in parallel. So if that's a wireless connection, for instance, and you're doing rehearsals, you could take your laptop, walk around the auditorium and do changes as you wish from there. So it's the full control of the PC. So with we spoke about Dante previously. L200 was introduced, and from L200 onwards, all consoles now will have Dante and the Blacklight, which is the highly concentrated MADI, as standard. So all consoles now will have those connections as standard. So looking at the back of the console, we have, as well as the Dante connector, we've got MADI connections. So we've got, as with this console, we've got 6 BNC MADIs and 2 fiber MADIs. We've got 12 super analog mic line inputs and 12 outputs. We've got, all consoles have got redundant power supplies and a panel for external sync, word clock, that sort of thing. There are external USB connections for a mouse and a keyboard if you want to do it, and also a VGA output, which we have got running up here. You'll see that in a minute. So you can, on the external VGA, you could be showing the overview of the console whilst controlling the console from the touchscreen. There are redundant Blacklight ports. Now, Blacklight is our implementation of a high-density MADI transport stream. This is a Blacklight concentrator. It will take inputs from up to 8 stage boxes. So 8 MADI stage boxes can feed into this and then be fed up a single pair of fibers to the console. The second one is just a redundant version, so you can run it without that if you like. So 8 times 32 is 256 sends and returns on a single fiber. And there are some local AES as well with sample rate conversion, so 4 pairs in and out. If you run out of inspiration with the internal effects rack, and you must use something that you've got in your external waves rack or whatever, you can plug it in via there's a MADI effects loop connection, so it's 32 in and out, and use your favorite thing that way. Now, the disadvantage of doing that is that there's latency because you have to convert in and out. Whereas if you use the internal effects, every effects device that you plug into the circuit adds 1 sample of latency, so it's nothing. So there's huge advantages to using the internal effects rack, and generally most people have thrown away their effects rack. That's one of the great things about the console. It's completely self-contained. All the processing's inside, and all the effects are inside it as well. On L200, because we've got the tablet stand on the front, we've got an iJack, so you can get sound straight in off your iPad straight into the console. Also released at Frankfurt was a new stage box. We have already had available a couple of stage boxes, mic pre-stage boxes. One's got 8 in and 8 out, one's got 16 in. This new one has 32 in, 16 out, and 4 AES pairs. Now, All of these stage boxes have a feature I think is unique to SSL, which is a Dante split output. So as well as the normal Dante stream from the mic pre, which will change as I change the gain from here. So if I change the mic gain, the output level will go up and down. There's also a gain compensated stream, Dante stream. So that means that if I increase the analog gain by 10 dBs, for instance, there'll be a digital reduction in the gain on the gain compensated Dante stream of 10 dB. So its gain will stay constant. So you can then feed, say, an OB truck or a broadcaster from your Dante stage box with a gain compensated output. So any change you make will have no effect on him. So it's the same idea as using an analog split pre any gain change in the mic in the analog domain, but it's all done in the Dante domain. Further enhance that in the new larger stage box by having 2 network outputs. So all of our Dante boxes have 2 network connectors. So you've got a primary and secondary network, so it's always running redundant Dante networking. But on this box there are network A and network B, so there's another pair of Dante connectors. They have SFPs on them, so you can change from copper to fiber and from multi-mode to single mode, depending on which SFP you plug in. And it runs in 2 ways. So you can either have it running so that the normal uncompensated output is on network A and the compensated output is on network B, in which case the networks are completely separate. You could create a network B from several of these and feed that network to the OB truck. It would then never see any of the things that are on network A. So network A is in your theatre or your event. The truck will get its network B feed, but will never see the network A stuff. Or you can join them up internally, in which case they have a mirror image of all 64 outputs, because you've got 32 normal outputs, 32 gain compensated outputs. So it's up to you how you want to use the box. It's a simple procedure to change them over. So Audinate produce chipsets that everyone uses in their Dante devices. They have the small one is called Ultimo. It has 2 inputs and outputs at 96K. The Brooklyn is the one you've come across most because it has 32 in and out at 96K. And they've just introduced a new one called Broadway, which is 16 in and out. For our System T broadcast console, we decided to make it totally Dante, but we need more capacity than that. So there is a Dante HC connection, which is designed by the OEM company, by SSL, and that will give you 256 channels in and out on a 1 gig connection. Now, System T has a standard 2 and maximum 6, generally runs at 48K, because that's what broadcasters run at. So at 48K, you've actually got over 3,000 inputs and outputs possible into a System T console. But at 96K, you can, as I say, from a 1 gig connector, you can get 256 inputs and outputs to and from the Dante network. So we are in the process of introducing a new device. We showed the prototype of it at Frankfurt a couple of weeks ago. It will be available hopefully about Q3 this year, and it is a Dante to Blacklight bridge. So with this device, if you connect it to the Dante network, and then you connect it to Blacklight, you will be able to subscribe to 256 channels from the Dante network and also feed up to 256 channels back onto the Dante network. So it means you can produce very large integrated systems with lots of resource sharing. So the type of thing you'll be able to do is like this. I've got here I've got a couple of traditional MADI stage boxes, feeding a Blacklight concentrator into an L500, and then I've got a Dante network here with some Dante stage boxes, and from there I've got bridges, Dante bridges, feeding 256 in and out to there, to the recording console, a direct feed to System T because it is Dante, it doesn't need any, it just works with Dante, and an output to a truck if you need to. So you can produce very, very complex shared solutions. The MADI stuff carries on. We have, these boxes are what we have here, so I've got a 32 in, 32 out mic, 32 mic in, 32 out box here with splits on the back, an AS box with 16 pairs in and out, and as I say, there's the concentrator at the top there. Now all of these boxes, the MADI boxes, the Dante boxes, all use the same super analog mic pre-circuitry that we developed originally for the 9K and then for AWS and Dante, Duality. It's one of the reasons why we sound better, because you start off with the best possible sound. And they're not simple designs, they use discrete components, so it's not a single chip solution like a lot of mic pre's are these days. So L200, because it runs the same software, it's compatible with 300 and 500. They all use the same software. And as I say, we use the same software in the offline setup as well, which is one of the reasons why it only runs on a Windows PC. We now have a family running from the Salsa, L200, 300, 500. The family is getting bigger and probably will get bigger again. Early in the year, February, we introduced some new software. So we have the integrated Dante routing that I talked about in the console. So that's now standard. You can now change the sample rate between the console and the Dante network. So you can now run your truck on a Dante network being fed at 48K, for instance, and have the rest of the system running at 96K. We talked about the Taco control app, which is available, as I say, for Android and iOS systems. An annoying feature before was you couldn't set a default solo point. You now can. It's just a little operational thing. If you knew about it, you'd be really pleased to hear that. If you don't know about it, don't worry about it. Same again for the direct output. There is a new, more intuitive copy system, so I can go to a channel, say I want this to be my source, I want to copy this thing, and then choose destinations, so I can, for instance, copy EQ settings, or I could copy master bus routing. So so once I've set up one channel, set up its routing, I can go, okay, this is what I want to copy. I can group select destinations paste that routing into all those channels. A touch sense parameter, which means on the screen it shows you which control you're actually adjusting, just to give you that confidence. And that's, if you download the Taco app, it's available free. Anyone can download it. It won't do much unless you connect it to a console. It's really boring unless you have a console connected to it. But it's available free. If you download the Salsa app, it will install on your PC in the programs file. Within that programs file, you'll find a help folder. And within that help folder, you'll find a whole load of HTML files. Now, those HTML files, you can copy that folder across to any device, a Mac device or whatever. And from there, you can use that help file. So you can just navigate through it with a browser in a normal way. So you don't have to use Salsa. You can actually, you can even, it's really boring, but you can actually put it onto an iPad, but you have to physically create the folder structure manually. It takes a long time. It takes half an hour or so. So as from V4, we're changing it. Now, you can't get hold of that the moment because it's in the developer stage. But once V4 is released to the public, then you'll be able to go to the App Store and download the free SSL Live Help app, which you can run on here. I have the developer one running on here, which means anyone can have the Help app on their phone or their tablet, and you can look at it any time whatsoever. So then, if you phone up and you've got a problem, we just tell you to RTFM, because that's what you need to do. So that's coming soon when we release V4. So V4 was previewed at Frankfurt. I have it running on this console. It has bugs. Hopefully we know what most of them are now, and a lot of them have already been fixed, but not on this version of software that I have here. So there are definitely things that on here are broken. This console is forbidden to be used for a live event because it's not running the latest stable software. We have development software on here because I want to show you all the new lovely stuff. But it is broken. Not very broken, but a bit broken. So, for instance, there are you have the ability now to, on a channel-by-channel base, protect a channel from being recalled by the automation scene-based automation system. So I can reload a scene, but manually protect channels from being changed. It has a new XY router, which replaces the old quick routing page that we had. This is much more easy to understand, and it's very obvious how you do things. You can do the same kind of quick routing thing where you can route a whole block of stuff. So I can choose 1 to 16 inputs to channels, and it'll do rather than doing one at a time. We can now route to third-party devices, not just SSL devices, to and from Dante third-party devices. There's a new feature for linking paths. Those paths can be channels or buses. So once I can go to the linking feature, create a group of paths, and once having done that, anything I do to one of them will be reflected into the other one. So the obvious thing is link them together. If I move the fader on one of them, all the faders will go up and down. But that could be any control. That could be literally any control in the channel path. So it could be the mic gain, for instance. I want to increase the mic gain of all these things by a little bit. Having created that linked group, I can temporarily suspend it, make an individual change to something. I want that to be just different on that one, and then re-energize the group. So you don't have to go back and recreate it. So it's once again, speeds up the workflow. Rather than having to type all the names in on my offline setup or on the console, I can now import a CSV file. So if you've got a CSV file with all the names of your stage box sources, destinations, you can now just simply import that file. It'll feed through. Because the console is clever enough to be able to be reconfigured, I could be in a situation where, for instance, I've done all my channels, got 64 channels laid out. I want channel 2 to be stereo. So I've changed channel 2 to be stereo, which I can do, no problem. But it will use path 65 to make the other half of the stereo strip. So when it comes to the numbering, the layout, it all gets a bit weird. So we've now got the renumbering feature, which just puts them all into a continuous numerical order. An annoying feature which comes from the console being very powerful. So TACO is now on V4. TACO now allows you, as well as faders, you now got mute control. There will be more developments as time goes on. There's a new processor in the effects rack, which is for subharmonics. So you can produce a processed sub bass signal. One of the common things, and you heard it on those people talking, is that the consoles sound better, which is a great thing, and I'm sure every salesman says that about their consoles, but it's one thing that all our users say. And it's because we use the very best front end and carry it through to the console. If you don't get it right here, it doesn't matter what you do there, it's never going to get any better. All of the consoles use the same interface, so you can very quickly move from a 200 to a 500. It's the same software. It's the same show files even. And from day one, it's proved that the reliability that we designed in from the start actually does do the job. It's a very reliable, stable platform. And it's featured more and more now on riders for world tours. So there was a review last year in the States, the top 100 touring acts, and SSL Live consoles were number 3. Now, for a company that's only been making live consoles since 2013, I think that's pretty good. And you know, our attention now is to be number 2 next. We have some package prices for L200. These provide a slight discount on the normal pricing. So an L200 with 2 of the Dante stage boxes is available ex-works UK price of $38,352. Now, this one has a proviso. You need to know this. This will only provide 64 inputs if you run the console at 48K. It's a limitation of the Dante port, because the Brooklyn card will only give you 64 inputs if you run it at 48K. So you can have 64 inputs. It's got to run at 48K until the bridge is available, which then you'll be able to run at 96K. You can add another console to that package. It goes up to 67,320. Or you can have MADI stage boxes, so 64 in, 32 out, L200, and obviously this will work at 96K, 40,542. If you want to add fiber to that, it goes up to 44,254. So these are we think these are really, really good pricing. Differences between the consoles throughout the family. I talked about the L200 having 144 fully processed paths. The L300, which I have here, also has 48 dry paths. Now, dry paths have 2 insert points and a fader, and can expand your capabilities. So, for instance, if you have an aux that just needs a graphic equalizer in it, you can make it out of a dry path, go to the effects rack, insert the virtual graphics equalizer into the path, and now you can make that into your aux bus. So you don't have to use fully processed paths if you're not going to be using all that processing. The L500 expands on the number again. So the fader tiles, you've got 3 tiles on the 200 and the 500, 2 on here, so 24 faders here. The matrix can be split into 4 smaller ones, up to 4, and the L200 matrix is slightly smaller. It's got 24 as opposed to 36 VCAs. The number of effect slots is 48 and 96 on the 500. They all have exactly the same number of effects. It's the same effects throughout the range, and they're all free. They're all included in the price. There's no extra charge for any of those. Sample rate, you choose whether you want to run at 96 or 48. Local analog, there's more as you go up the range. Same with AES and MADI ports. They all have one effects loop. There are 2 Blacklight connections on the 500. They all have one Dante connection. Obviously, with the extra I/O, you've got capability of 1,000 in the 500, 600 in the other ones. The control tile is this tile here, which you might think is obvious that you need to have that, but in fact our users have said that they actually don't use it that often. It's something that me as a occasional user uses because it's a very obvious way of getting to things. But once you get into using the console, we've been told that people don't use it. They use the screen or the quick controls. So for everything you want to adjust, there's always at least 3 ways of being able to do it. So on the L200, to simplify things, we've we've removed it. The touch screen has exactly the same functionality. It's just slightly smaller on the L200, and on the L500 it's a daylight viewing screen, so it's 1500 nits. So to give you an idea, 600 nits is the same as an iPad, so it's pretty bright. The 1500 one works in Dubai in the sun. I've got users that tell me this. All the consoles have 2 power supplies, or they're obviously different widths and weights. So what we have here today is the L300. I'd love to have brought you 200, but sorry, sold out. So what we're going to do now is have some hands-on. So if you want to come up, Manos is going to look after you in Greek. And you can have a play on the console. Do what you want to do. You can't break it.